Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Shift Church. My name is Joe Smith. I'm the family pastor here, and it is good to see everybody, whether you're here in person or you're at home watching the stream. We have been in a multi-week series. We're walking through the Gospels of Jesus. The Gospel just merely means a proclamation of good news, right? That there is a new king and a new kingdom. And we're using the letter written by a man named Matthew as our guide, all right? Matthew was a Jewish man. He's writing to a Jewish audience. All four Gospels were to different audiences, and they all had little different agendas. He was the outsider. He was a tax collector. He was seen as like this race traitor, the lowest of the low, and yet Jesus shows up and gives him the second chance. And so he's writing to this group of very religious people, and his agenda is the outsider, showing all these people that are on the inside that all of these people that are on the outside looking in, that they have God's favor too. And so we've been walking through this, and we've come out of what's called the Sermon on the Mount. Well, we're in the middle of it, but we've come out of the Beatitudes, rather, all right? And it's this announcement of who the kingdom is for. And he starts it off with, there's this huge group of people, and he gathers his disciples, and he says, hey, do you see all those people out there? All of the people, it's this mixed group of like super religious to not religious at all. Like just straight up what they would refer to as pagans. Groups of people that made the disciples uncomfortable. You see all of those people? They have God's favor. All those people that you consider on the outside, they have God's favor. Which is why it goes through this whole list of blessed are those, blessed are those, blessed are those. And if you look at that list, Matthew chapter 5, starting with in the very beginning, you see this list. And at the top of the list is the brokenness that we all experience. And the bottom of that list is what happens when we try to engage that brokenness. And when we see a top half and a bottom half, then we know, it's called a chiasm, we know that there's this central teaching, that the main point, and the main point of that beatitude was those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Righteousness doesn't mean rightness, like we have right standing. It means generosity. It is the Hebrew it's the word tzedakah, which means generosity. It means that it's propelling us to do something. That if we want to hunger and thirst for generosity, we want to see kingdom come, that it means that we have to be merciful. And that means compassion. That we have to have compassion and not just sitting around being like, I'm going to post about it. I'm going to do something about it. And so we followed that by looking at what Jesus meant when he said, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. And in Jewish teaching, it means I've come to put it on display. I'm going to show you what it means, what God always meant in the Old Testament. All of these laws, these 613 laws, all of this stuff, I'm here to live it out perfectly for you. And then Brad last week followed it up with his teaching. You have heard it said, but I say to you. And he's not upping the ante. Brad talked about that. He's not upping the ante of what God originally said. And no. Now I'm going to make it even harder. No. He was showing us. This is what it means. This is what God meant the whole time. You guys just didn't quite get it. Now, let me show you. So, you have heard it said, don't cheat on your wife. But I say to you, even if you look at somebody with lust, you're cheating on them, right? And then he goes on to say, hey, fellas, pluck out that eyeball. That's a whole nother story. And so now we're going to take a look at a different passage. We're going to take a look at, we're going to be in Matthew chapter 6, and we're going to be starting with verse 6. And we're looking at, let's just jump into it, all right? And then we'll go into it. So I'm going to read a chunk of scripture, and then we're going to see what it actually means. So follow along with me. Matthew chapter 6, starting with verse 6, says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness," remember? Your compassion, your generosity, "in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets to be honored by others. Truly I tell you, they have received the reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. Then your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. And when you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, and pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think that they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. And when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received the reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Now, all right, that's a lot of stuff that we just read. But before we actually jump into it, I want to address a couple of things, and we're going to get into like the main thing of what he's talking about. So I want to address what Jesus isn't saying before we get into what he actually is saying. And I want to do that starting with 3 words and some context, all right? 3 words: when, secret, and hypocrite. Let's start with the word when, all right? A lot of times people, look at following Jesus as this or that, but notice he says when, not if. He says when you give, not if you give. And he says when you pray, not if you pray, or when you fast, not if you fast. As Jesus followers, we're called to do those things. Now, we may not do them really well at the beginning, but he's called us to do those things. And so Jesus just says, hey, when you do this, and it's just an expectation that as a Jesus follower, that I'm going to do these things. I'm going to pray, I'm going to give, I'm going to fast, and how to do those types of things. That's another time, another talk. But I just want to make you guys aware to point that out. He doesn't say if, he says when. The second word, secret. All right? So we get hung up when we read through this. Now, in the church world, I'm going to speak from my experience growing up in the church, that we got hung up on this word secret. Like you can't let other people see your walk. Don't let people know you're doing good things. But don't forget that just a few teachings ago, like in Matthew chapter 5, he talks about what? Let your light shine so that others will see your good deeds and do what? Praise your Father in heaven. Wait a second. You just got done saying, let everybody see your good deeds. And now you're telling me that I can't let people see my good deeds? So which is it, right? So maybe it's our understanding of what Jesus is actually saying, because somehow whatever Jesus is actually talking about has to match with this idea of being a light, of people seeing our good deeds and praising God because of them, right? So maybe it's our misunderstanding of the word secret. Like, for instance, he talks about praying, right? Don't pray out here. And he talks about the NIV, the new NIV, does a poor job translating this, because it actually means prayer closet, which is a better translation, but was kind of confusing for us in our context, because it's like, wait, you're telling me to go pray? Like, we have a few closets in the house. There's no room for us to go pray in the closet. I mean, I got to move a vacuum and then there's some blankets, and I have a fan in there, oscillating fan. So every time I pray, I'm going to have to take all that stuff out and squeeze myself. And then there's coats, right? Like, where am I going to go? You want me, I can pray like this? You know? No, that's not what he's talking about, all right? This is what he's talking about. Do you have that picture of the prayer shawl? No. That's not it. It's not in there? Okay. All right, so that's fine. That's not the picture. We could take that down. There you go. All right. That is not a prayer closet. If you're watching the stream, you can't see that, all right? So you just missed it. I'm sorry, but that was fantastic. What does that have to do with prayer? Nothing. Not a thing. So anyway, in Jesus' day, and even today, they have something called the prayer shawl, all right? And it's almost like this blanket that goes around you. Now, when they were talking about going into the prayer closet, they would take the ends of that shawl, and they would cover themselves like this, all right? Now, if you're standing next to me, and we're at the Temple Mount, or we're at the Wailing Wall, and I've got that prayer shawl, and I'm covered up like this, can you see what I'm doing? It's kind of obvious, isn't it? It's obvious what I'm doing. You know what I'm doing, all right? Or how about when it talks about giving with a short trumpet blast? Or he said, don't announce it with trumpets, right? During this time period, if you wanted to see a play, like we're sitting in a movie theater, right? And you come here to watch our version of those things. And this sucker is in like high def, right? I mean, it's whatever the latest technology is. And you can come here and you can see that. I mean, you're going to see up close your favorite actors and actresses. But during this time period, if you wanted to see you knew an actor was coming or a famous actress was coming and they were going to be in the play, you were sitting in this outdoor amphitheater. And if you were lucky enough, you might be close to be able to see who when the famous actor was coming out. Most people would be sitting back. Even if you were close, they would be so dolled up with makeup, or maybe they're wearing masks, you wouldn't know or recognize when the famous actor was coming out. So what would happen is, when the famous actor that was coming out, all right, they would do a short, unobtrusive trumpet blast, a horn blast, to let you know the person you came to see is coming out on stage. Burp. And then they would walk out. Oh, there they are. That's who I came to see. And so it's not necessarily about what people can and can't see. It's about the motivation. It's about what's done in secret, all right? It's about, why are you doing these things, all right? Because it's obvious when I pray, right? I'm doing this. So secret isn't necessarily like, hey, shh, don't let them know that you're giving to the poor. Don't let them know that you pray. It's why. Why are you praying? And so when he says they have gotten their reward in full. Oh, look at that Christian. He gave so much money. That's his reward. That's his reward. And so he's worried about our motivation. The third and final one. Now, hypocrite. When I say the word hypocrite, what do you think of? Seriously, I'm asking. What does it mean to be a hypocrite? Right. Right. You're going to say one thing and then do another, right? You say one thing and then you do another. The problem is that when Jesus says hypocrite, that's not what he means. Hypocrite means this in our culture and our time period, but hypocrite simply means actor. Actor. Who did Jesus spend most of his time with religiously? It was a group called the Pharisees, right? And he calls them hypocrites all the time. The problem with that, our understanding, there was nobody else in that area that was more dedicated to the text, to saying the right thing and then living it out than the Pharisees, all right? But again, it's the motivation. It's why. Now, I don't fanboy a lot. Okay, I just don't. I've met some famous people, and it's like, oh, that's cool. Yeah, I've seen you on that thing. Great. One of the first people I ever met was, I don't remember if you guys remember the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? If you haven't seen it, go watch it now. It's fantastic. It's one of my all-time favorites. Fantastic movie. George Clooney's amazing in it, all right? And there's a scene where there's a fight in the Woolsworth between George Clooney, and I can't even remember the guy's name anymore. I met that guy at a wedding, the guy that punched George Clooney. He was also the football coach in, what's the name? I just lost it. I'm sorry. COVID brain. What's the name of the movie about the left tackle that played for Baltimore Ravens? Sandra Bullock was in it. Blindside. Thank you. He plays the football coach in that movie, and it was cool. You know, that's awesome. I've seen you, but there was this one time, and you've already seen the picture. There was this one time. You can show that again. We were in the Orlando International Airport. I was going to pick up my niece who was flying down for spring break to hang out with us for a week or so. And in comes Warwick Davis, all right? The dude is in all these Star Wars movies. He's Professor Flitwick in Harry Potter. He's Willow. Some of you are like, who's Willow? Learn. Yes, one of the greatest 80s ever. And I love Warwick Davis, all right? And I fanboyed, all right? I fanboyed. Need to turn this off? Fanboyed. Whoa, there we go. I totally fanboyed. And as a matter of fact, my daughter and my niece, they had no idea who he was. So when he comes walking along with his wife, I'm just staring like, I literally did that. I was like, and my daughter thought I was being rude because he's a little person. And I'm like, no, you jerk. That's Warwick Davis. And she's like, who's Warwick Davis? And I'm like, you're walking home. So I walked up to him super politely, and I was like, sir, can I get my picture taken with you? I have been a fan of yours since I was a child. And he was super cool. You know, he just got off the airplane. He was trying to get some food, but he was super awesome, and he let me take that picture with him, and I fanboyed a little bit, all right? Now, I say all of that to say that he is a hypocrite. He's an actor. That's literally all a hypocrite means. And so when Jesus starts talking about this idea of hypocrites do this because they're acting, right? It's the idea of what's done in secret. What's the motivation behind it? So when we read hypocrite, we think then they're saying one thing and doing another. But they're saying the right things. They're doing the right things. It's what's in secret that's wrong. So when the Pharisees pray, they want to stand on the street corners and they want to give a performance. Why? Because they're actors, right? When they give, they do so, and he says what? He says, don't announce it with a trumpet blast. Why? Because that's what actors do, right? And when they fasted, they made up their face. They didn't shave and they didn't wash their hair. Why? Because they're acting. And that's why Jesus says, no, wash your face, comb your hair. You're not trying to get the praise of people. What's done in secret? What's done in secret will change you. All right? So now that we've addressed that, what is Jesus really saying? What's he trying to get at here? All right? So with this teaching on giving is really short. This teaching on fasting is really short. And then he spends right in the middle this big amount of time on prayer. All right? So we're gonna focus in on that section of prayer. Because anytime in Jewish writing, anytime you see something like standing out in the middle of something, that's where they want you to go. Just as a reminder, in Hebrew teaching, rabbinical teaching, the journey to the truth is as important as the discovery of the truth. So just for instance, if the truth is next door, then a rabbi is going to take you all the way on a walk around your neighborhood to get to next door. Where as Americans, our way of thinking, I just want to walk next door and get the answer. But Jesus is going to take you on this journey. All right? And so we're taking a look at this prayer, at this idea of prayer. Now, here's the thing. Like, we know this prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, right? It's the Lord's Prayer. Even if you've never been to church, it's still a pretty familiar prayer, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth. And I even still repeat it in the King James because that's where I learned it, right? So it just flows that way. The thing is that Jesus didn't make this prayer up. And it's not the only time he mentions it. And in one of the other Gospels, they come to him, they're like, hey, teach us to pray. This is a very common prayer. It's called the Amidah prayer. The oldest Amidah prayer that we have predates Jesus by several decades. Several decades. As a matter of fact, this is the oldest Amidah prayer that we have on record. Oh, and just so you know, today, they actually still say it. It's much more in depth. It's like 1 to 2 pages. And during this time period, they would say it. It was a standing prayer. They said it at the Temple Mount at noon every day, and they said it in groups of 10. So you'd go to the Temple Mount, and you would go say it with your group of 10, and then as you were leaving, maybe there was a group of 8 over here, and they're like, hey, Joe, come over here and say the prayer with us. And so I'd go over there and say the prayer with them, and you would say it several times together. So this was a well-known prayer. This is the oldest Amidah prayer that we have on record that predates Jesus by a few decades at least. It says this, Our Father, the one who dwells in heaven, may your name be holy. May your kingdom come as we do your will here on earth as it is done in heaven. Give us today the bread of today and deliver us from the evil one. Cursed be he. Now, do you notice a difference between what Jesus said and what that prayer says? Let me read Jesus' prayer. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we have also forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. What's different? What did Jesus add? You can talk. What did he add? Somebody said it. Yeah, forgive us. Yeah, forgiveness. He added forgiveness. And here's the thing. Here's why that's so important. Because in all of Judaism, especially during this time period, forgiveness was God's job. Now, I'm going to pray for forgiveness, and I will even pray that God forgives you, but what you have done wrong is between you and God. Even if you've wronged me, it's not my role to forgive you, it's God's role to forgive you. And so for the very first time, Jesus shows up and he adds this, and he invites us into the process of forgiveness. And it's a radical idea that we have just fairy-taled. That we just roll right over and it's like, yeah, absolutely. No. Jesus is inviting us into the process of forgiveness. And it's a big deal. This is the core teaching that he's talking about right here, this idea of us participating in forgiveness. Now, can you see forgiveness? Is something forgiveness that I can stand on a street corner and announce with a trumpet blast? No. Because as a matter of fact, my wife could come in here and she could be holding a grudge about something that I said, and she could very well be doing that. I don't know. But she could smile and nod at me and tell me she loves me and all this stuff, and I would have no idea, because forgiveness is something that's here, right? It's in secret. Now, obviously, how you behave could show that you have forgiven somebody, but I can act like I've forgiven you and hold a grudge the rest of my days, and you would never know it. So I want to end this little talk with the idea of forgiveness. But before we get to what forgiveness is, we have to talk about what forgiveness isn't. All right? Forgiveness isn't saying the wrong doesn't matter or it's trivial. Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it is. Sometimes I did something stupid, right? And it's just forgive and forget, and it's small, and you just kind of move on, right? I mean, really, sometimes it is. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes the wrong that happened was deep. It was a wound, and it does matter. And it isn't trivial. And it's not something that you can just forgive and forget and move on. Sometimes that wound, you've been hurt, and Forgiveness doesn't mean that the thing that happened to you doesn't matter, because it does matter. Forgiveness isn't saying that what happened is okay. All right? It's not okay. It follows right on the back of what I just said, that it does matter, and it's not okay that it happened. Some of the things that some of you carry, some of the things that I carry, to this day wound me deeply. And it's not cool that it happened. It's not okay that somebody did or said those things. And all of us carry the wounds, the scars of those things that happen in our life. And it's not okay that it happened. Some of us, some of you, will have to go through therapy that you should have never had to go through because of what somebody has done to you. Your life took a different course because of something that somebody did, and it's not okay. And forgiveness isn't saying that what happened is okay. Forgiveness isn't saying that there aren't consequences. Again, sometimes it is, right? I mean, my son, my kids, they'll do something dumb, and it's just like, okay, whatever. Don't do that again, right? And then there's just not really any consequences. But that doesn't mean that what happened to you, that there just aren't consequences. That doesn't mean that saying, I forgive you, erases the pain. It doesn't mean that there aren't amends that I still have to make because of something that I've done to somebody. I won't go into it, but when my wife and I were first married, I did some pretty stupid stuff. And I wounded my wife deeply. All right? And she forgave me. It wasn't an unforgivable sin. I was stupid, young, whatever. But I hurt her. And it took, there were a lot of days and months of me making amends for those things. The way I made her feel. Just because you say I forgive you doesn't mean there aren't consequences. Just because somebody's forgiven you or you've forgiven somebody, it doesn't mean that the pain is no longer there. There's still work that has to be done. Forgiveness, now listen to this one. Forgiveness isn't saying you don't leave the situation or you don't call the police. Hear me when I say that. Whether you're here in person or you're on the stream, forgiveness isn't saying you don't leave the situation or you don't call the police. I can't tell you how many times growing up in the church and having worked in the local church for 20 years that the church has been guilty of using this idea of forgiveness to cover up abuse. The church universal has used this idea of forgiveness and just saying, oh, you just forgive. You just forgive the thing. And you move on. Jesus said forgive, and if you don't forgive, then he can't forgive you. And that's what happens when you take forgiveness and you turn it into this Sunday school Care Bear, like, oh, forgive. And it's usually said by perpetrators or leaders within the church that have never engaged in the deeply profound act of forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you don't leave the situation or you don't call the police. Hear me when I say this. If you're being abused, leave immediately. Immediately. Physically, emotionally, verbally, spiritually. And the church should be the place that helps facilitate that leaving in a helpful and healthy way. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you stay in the situation or that you don't call the police. Forgiveness isn't saying that there aren't appropriate boundaries. Forgiveness doesn't mean that I'm going to allow you back into my life 100%. All right? Forgiveness isn't saying that there aren't appropriate boundaries. You can go ahead and show that. You have wronged me. You have hurt me. and I can forgive you, but I'm not going to put myself back in that situation. For whatever reason, there are just people that are toxic, whether it's a relative or it's like a family member or boss or people that's within our sphere of influence or whatever. They are there, and we know that they're there. And I don't have to put myself back in that situation. As a matter of fact, keeping myself out of that situation helps facilitate forgiveness because I can then work on forgiveness by being away from that. And so it's like that situation where like I'm not going to be there for Christmas this year because every time I show up, you treat me or my family, my spouse, my significant other, my children, and make them feel less than. And I will not subject myself to that any longer. I love you and I forgive you, but you're going to be over there. Forgiveness doesn't mean that you have full access back in my life. It's like, well, forgiveness isn't saying that there aren't appropriate boundaries. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is refusing to make them pay for what they did. And here's the thing that is so hard to do, because not only do you suffer what they did to you, you have to let go of your need to make them pay, to make them feel the same pain that you did. Jesus tells this parable. It's a story about a king who forgives a debt. 10,000 bags of gold, and he absorbs that debt. He forgives his servant the debt and absorbs it. And that's what Jesus is calling us to do. Does that sound easy? Does that sound delightful? Does that sound like just forgive? No, it's hard work. We have to break the vengeance cycle. And far too often when we talk about this idea of forgiveness, that's where we stop. We stop at the first step. But forgiveness is more than just refusing to make them pay for what they did. It's this. Forgiveness is an ongoing choice, which is right on the tail of refusing to make them pay. Because I got to tell you this, you guys. I'm not going to go into details. But there are people I want to make them pay. Man, I want them to pay. To this day, there are things that my family struggles with to this day because of stupid, I'm going to reel that back in, mistakes and choices that people made in our lives that affected us negatively, and I want them to pay over and over again. I want them to make them pay. And I have to choose forgiveness. I have to. You know why I have to choose forgiveness? Because it just eats me up inside, man. It just tears me apart. And I have to let go of that. Not for their sake, but for mine. I have some good friends that we've known for years, where the husband had an affair and was caught. And they were able to reconcile. They were able to reconcile. It took years of hard work. And he was willing. That was the thing, right? He was willing. The perpetrator, the one in the wrong, made amends. She told me one time that there are times where they'll be standing around and he'll be talking to somebody, and a woman, and all of that stuff just comes crashing back. And that she has to make the choice all over again to forgive him. That is a deep work. Right? And that's what I think the last thing that forgiveness is that forgiveness is about the work of Jesus within us. Jesus calls us to partner with him, right? That's what this whole thing is about, is partnering with him. And so in the Beatitudes, when it talks about hungering and thirsting for kingdom come, that if we want to see empathy and compassion lived out, we have to be merciful. We have to partner with him in mercy and bringing mercy and compassion through activity. So if the first half of the Sermon on the Mount is how to interpret Torah, the last half of the Sermon on the Mount is how to live it out. And right smack dab in the middle is this prayer. And right smack dab in the middle of this prayer is forgiveness. Jesus talks about what was done in secret because he's calling us to something more than what we've been given, to something more than we've been taught, and maybe something more than we're living. If we want to partner with Jesus in the Jewish idea of tikkun olam, which means repairing of the world, we have to partner with him in forgiving. And it's a work that's done within us. That's why Jesus pointed out the actors, said they've gotten their reward, got their applause, they got people clapping for them. But this hard work of forgiveness, of letting go of making them pay, of choosing over and over and over again to forgive, and then allowing Jesus to work within us is done in secret. Our reward is a change of heart, of who we are. And because of that change within us, then it changes the things around us. Then we bring kingdom come. Then we bring mercy. Then we bring compassion. Then we bring justice. Then we bring repairing the world, reconciliation to those around us. That's partnering with Jesus. And that's what he's talking about here. Guys, listen to me. I need you to hear this, all right? Don't forget what forgiveness isn't. Man, you got to hang on to those things. But hear me when I say this, that I think that the church was built for this moment in time that we're experiencing in our culture. I think we were built for this shift. To show people a third way. Following Jesus isn't right and it isn't left. We're a third way. We're going to advocate for the things of Jesus regardless of the labels that our culture puts on them. We're going to fight for those on the outside because the gospel fights for a seat at the table for everybody. And we do that by being merciful and by forgiving. And those two things can only happen when a work of Jesus is done within us. And so this morning, I want to pray for you guys. I want to pray for all those that are sitting here in person. I want to pray for you watching on the stream. And so what is it in your life? Right? We've all got those things that we carry with us. What is it that God is talking to you about right now? Maybe you're the one that was in the wrong. Maybe you're the one that caused the pain. Who do you need to go to make amends? Who do you need to go to say, oh, I'm sorry. And I'm going to do the things that I have to do between me and God to make this right. Who is it that you need to let go of the need to make pay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pray. I'm going to pray for you guys. I'm going to pray that God speaks to you in the way that you, and the things that you need to work through, to reconcile. How can you partner with Jesus in this idea of forgiveness? How can you partner with Jesus in seeing, okay, what is my motivation for these things? In bringing tikkun olam, repairing the world. Because you guys, not only in our personal lives, but our city needs repairing. Our state needs repairing. Our country needs repairing. And it's only going to be done if followers of Jesus live this out. Let's pray. Father, we just come before you this morning. God, I pray that you would break our hearts for the things that break yours. And Lord, I know that there's some broken hearts in this room right now. Then there's some broken hearts, people sitting in living rooms, watching on their phones or on their TV. First of all, Jesus, I pray that they feel right now man, they feel your love. Just overwhelm them. Drown them in your grace. Lord, I pray that they begin the hard work of forgiveness, that they begin the hard work of letting go of things, the hard work of appropriate boundaries, the hard work of leaving situations, the hard work of choosing, the hard work of letting you work in them. Because, Lord, it doesn't feel good. It feels like somebody's being let off the hook. So, Lord, I pray that you wrap them, you envelop them, you just suffocate them with your grace and your mercy and your love and help them begin the work. I pray for those of us that are in the process or have worked through those things, God, that we would walk with them. And then we would do so in a way that's healthy and helpful. Which means a lot of time, Lord, we just sit and we mourn with them. God, I pray that you would give us opportunities to live this out. And may we be a people that don't do things for the applause of those around us, but so that people can see who you truly are and begin to ask questions, begin to pursue you as you pursue them. Jesus, I don't know what to pray for everybody this morning. So Lord, I just want to lift them all up. The ones that are here in person, the ones that are on the stream, the ones that couldn't be here. God, I just laid them at your feet, asking that you work in their hearts. We're so thankful, Jesus, for how you lived this out, that you came not only to die for us, but that you suffered to show us how to suffer well. And that you promised that you would never abandon us in those moments, but that you would be right there with us, knowing exactly how it feels. So Jesus, we praise you. We lift up your name. And we ask all things in your name. Amen.